Let's do the entry cost math. There are 4 tiers to this business, and each one is a different animal. The smallest viable entry is a surface lot, raw asphalt, no structure overhead, just a fence, some painted lines, and a payment kiosk. In secondary markets like Indianapolis, Cleveland, or Memphis, a 30 to 50 space surface lot runs $300,000 to $800,000 to acquire. Equipment, a modern unattended kiosk system, signage, basic surveillance, adds $15,000 to $25,000. Your annual gross revenue, assuming a downtown adjacent location and 65% average daily utilization at $8 to $10 per day, runs $56,000 to $120,000. Against that, you are paying property tax, insurance, occasional repaving, and likely a part-time attendant for peak hours. You are not running a business. You are running a side project that generates the cash flow of a mediocre rental property at 10 times the effort per square foot. Tier 2 is a structured garage in a secondary market, 100 to 200 spaces, probably 5 to 8 floors, probably 25 to 40 years old. Cities like Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, or Albuquerque show these trading at $20,000 to $25,000 per space. A 150 space garage costs you $3 million to $3.75 million. Now you have real operating complexity, fire suppression system contracts, elevator maintenance agreements, facade repair cycles, a payroll that has to run every 2 weeks whether it snows or the downtown conference schedule is dead. Every major system in the building has a lifespan, and when it fails, the repair bill comes out of your NOI first, your reserve second, and your personal account if you don't have either. Tier 3 is a structured garage in a primary urban market, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Seattle. Per space acquisition prices jump to $35,000 to $50,000. A 300 space garage costs you $10. $5 million to $15 million at current valuations. For reference, WGI's 2024 Parking Structure Cost Outlook calculated a national median new build cost of $29, $900 per space for above-ground structured parking, with underground construction running above $40,000 per space once excavation and waterproofing are factored in. If you are paying market rate for an existing urban garage, you are close to replacement cost, which means you have zero margin for error on occupancy assumptions and zero room to absorb a demand shock. Tier 4 is not a garage acquisition, it is an operator acquisition. In October 2023, parking technology company Metropolis Technologies announced the acquisition of SP Plus Corporation, at the time the third largest parking operator in North America, for $1.5 billion. The deal closed in May 2024. Metropolis financed it with $1.05 billion in Series C equity and $650 million in debt. The combined entity operates more than 4,000 parking locations across the US and Canada, with over $4 billion in annual payment volume and more than 20,000 employees. By November 2025, following an additional $1.6 billion fundraise, Metropolis was valued at $5 billion. The entry cost to compete at that level is a venture capital raise. Most people reading this will not complete in their lifetimes. For a realistic portfolio investor, someone serious with real capital, building a regional operation, the minimum credible entry is $5 to $7 million of equity, which gives you the leverage capacity to assemble a $15 to $25 million portfolio. Below that, you are either a hobbyist or you are accumulating problems faster than you are accumulating assets. Before you operate a single public parking space in this country, you need 2 separate things from the government: a land use approval and an operating license. These are not the same thing. They do not move at the same speed, and they are not coordinated with each other. Zoning review comes first. It determines whether your specific parcel can be legally operated as a commercial parking facility. In most urban cores, commercial parking is either a conditional use, meaning it requires a public hearing, or a special use, meaning it requires a variance. You hire a land use attorney. You commission a traffic impact study. You appear before a zoning board. You respond to neighborhood objections that will arrive regardless of whether your garage will actually create new traffic Because parking garages in dense areas are genuinely contentious land use questions, and local politics are local politics. Budget 4 to 8 weeks for a favorable jurisdiction. Budget 4 to 6 months for one that has active opposition or conflicting planning direction. And right now, the planning direction in most major American cities is explicitly to reduce, not expand, structured parking. Building permits are separate. For an existing structure you are acquiring, you still need permits for any renovation, upgraded fire suppression, structural remediation, or equipment installation. High-demand city building departments run 3 to 6 weeks for standard plan review, arrive during busy season, spring and early summer, and you add weeks. Then the operating license. Philadelphia, as a specific example, the city's license and inspections department processes public garage and lot license applications with an initial 5 business day review, followed by a physical site inspection that typically takes an additional 30 days. That's just Philadelphia. Every municipality has its own process. Some have no meaningful process at all. The variance in regulatory friction between a permissive Sunbelt city and a layered northeastern municipality is the difference between a 60-day pre-opening timeline and a 10-month one. Stack it together: zoning approval, building permits, operating license, utility connections, and your required inspection certifications. Best case, in a favorable market, you are 4 to 5 months from acquisition to first dollar of revenue. Worst case, depending on your market and what inspectors find inside your newly acquired structure, you are a year out. Every month of that window is debt service with no revenue offset. You do not have to own the garage to make money from parking. This insight is responsible for more parking fortunes than ownership is. The management contract is a structure where your company operates a garage owned by someone else, a hospital system, a university, a downtown real estate developer, in exchange for a base management fee plus a percentage of gross revenue. Management fees typically run 8 to 12% of gross, sometimes with an upside share above a performance threshold. You need no acquisition capital. You need no mortgage. You need a track record, a staffing operation, an insurance program, and a software stack. Total startup cost, $75,000 to $150,000. That is the entire barrier to entry for a management contract parking business. The ceiling on that model is lower. You never capture asset appreciation. Your contracts renew every 3 to 5 years at the owner's discretion. But your risk profile is fundamentally different. You are not exposed to a structural collapse, a demand correction, or a catastrophic maintenance event in a building you own. The newer variant of this is technology-enabled passive management. Companies like Air Garage offer parking asset owners a full-service platform, AI-driven dynamic pricing, automated payment processing, enforcement, and customer service. They take 20 to 30% of gross revenue. The owner takes the rest without employing a single attendant. For a solo investor who acquired a small urban lot, this is the difference between a passive investment and a second job with a bad commute. The management contract route was, historically, how every major parking empire was built before private equity entered the space. You win a few university contracts, you build a reputation, you expand regionally, and eventually you either go national or you get acquired by someone who is already national. The acquisition is the exit. The management contracts are the proof of concept that makes the acquisition worth doing. Here is the actual financial engine, and it has almost nothing to do with parking. Think of it this way. A parking space is a hotel room for a car. The hotel room analogy works because both assets have the same core property. Once the unit sits empty, the revenue from that window is gone forever, but the fixed costs keep running regardless. The critical difference is that a hotel room costs roughly $150,000 to $250,000 per key to build in a major urban market, requires daily housekeeping, involves perishable amenities, and demands constant guest service. A parking space costs $30,000 to build, requires no daily service, no amenities, and no interaction unless something goes wrong. At a single space level, the math is straightforward. In downtown Philadelphia, a monthly parking lease runs $225 per month. Annualized, that is $2,700 per year from one space. You acquired that space as part of a garage purchase at roughly $30,000 per space. Gross yield, 9%. After operating expenses, which run 35 to 40% of gross revenue across most well-managed facilities, you net 5.4 to 5.9% on that space, at a 6. 5% cap rate applied to your stabilized NOI, that space is worth approximately what you paid for it. You are running hard to stand still. Now scale it. The same math applied to a portfolio of 1-200 spaces across 8 garages, but with your own management infrastructure replacing the third-party operator at 10 to 12% of gross. Your operating cost ratio falls from 38% to 29%. Because the fixed overhead of your management company, the regional manager, the maintenance crew, the software licensing is now spread across 1-200 revenue-generating units instead of 150. Your NOI on the same gross revenue is $580,000 higher. At a 6.5% cap rate, that overhead efficiency has added $8.9 million in portfolio value, created entirely by scale and without acquiring a single additional parking space. This is what Metropolis bought when they paid $1.5 billion for SP+. They did not buy parking lots. They bought the network 4,000 managed locations feeding transaction data into AI-driven dynamic pricing systems. Better pricing data means higher yield per space per hour. Higher yield means higher NOI. Higher NOI means higher valuation. The parking is the commodity. The platform is the business. Metropolis also, it should be noted, discovered that enforcement revenue is a reliable income stream. In January 2026, the Tennessee Attorney General secured an $75 million settlement with Metropolis over what the AG described as deceptive practices. Fees of $10 that became $81, fees of $17 that became $68, and what the lawsuit characterized as a business model that made more money from fines than from parking revenue. Metropolis did not admit wrongdoing. The settlement included a free parking program and a commitment to reform its fee structure. The business model is real. The edges of the business model are also real. In 2003, a parking operator in Los Angeles named David Richard Scott, owner of Westside Services LLC, also operating as WSS, found what he believed to be a more efficient revenue enhancement strategy than dynamic pricing. Scott's company held the contract to operate parking facilities on the campuses of the VA Greater Los Angeles healthcare system. The contract covered standard weekday commuter parking, but also event parking, UCLA baseball games, theater productions at the Wadsworth and Brentwood theaters on the VA grounds, and the PGA Tour event at Riviera Country Club. This was a valuable, recurring, government-backed revenue stream. The challenge with government parking contracts is that they require competitive renewal. Scott solved this problem by ensuring the renewal was not competitive. The VA contracting officer who controlled Scott's renewal was named Ralph Tillman. Beginning in 2003 and continuing for 11 years, Scott paid Tillman nearly $300,000 in cash and other benefits. Tillman used his position to ensure WSS received favorable contract terms it would not have obtained through legitimate procurement. Federal prosecutors later calculated that the arrangement cost the Department of Veterans Affairs more than $13 million in revenue it was entitled to under the contract, money that flowed instead to WSS. The scheme ended in 2014 when federal agents confronted Tillman directly. He abruptly retired. The investigation ran for 4 years. In August 2018, United States District Judge R. Gary Klausner sentenced David Richard Scott, then 58, of Santa Monica, California, to 70 months in federal prison, just under 6 years. Ralph Tillman was sentenced separately to 5 months in federal prison, 5 months of home detention, and ordered to pay $62,000 in restitution to the IRS for taxes owed on bribe income he had not reported. What is notable about this case is not the corruption, which is unremarkable in procurement fraud. What is notable is the timeline, 11 years. The scheme ran for 11 years without triggering an investigation. The VA parking contract renewed, the event permits were approved, the money moved, and nobody official looked at the mechanism until federal agents chose to. Scott's calculation that the exposure was low and the revenue was high was correct for 11 years. It was then wrong all at once. On the morning of April 18, 2023, employees of a parking garage at 57 Ann Street in Manhattan's financial district removed a section of brick from a retaining wall. The removal was part of undocumented, unpermitted structural work. At approximately 4 p.m. that afternoon, the second floor of the garage collapsed onto the first floor. Willis Moore, 59, the garage manager who had worked at the facility for years, was killed. 7 other people were injured. The property was controlled by 57 Ann Street Realty Associates, a partnership led by brothers Allen and Jeffrey Hennick. The New York City Department of Buildings had issued 64 building code violations to that address dating back to 1976. The violations were not technical nuisances. An inspection in 2003, 20 years before the collapse, had documented concrete defects in the stairwell, cracks in the first floor ceiling, spalling concrete, steel structural members with missing concrete covering, and visible fissures in load-bearing elements. These findings were recorded. They were not resolved. A subsequent investigation tied the collapse not to age alone, but to the combination of decades of unaddressed structural deterioration and the active removal of load-bearing material by employees in the days before the event. The DOB issued 7 additional civil violations post-collapse: unpermitted structural alterations, failure to safeguard the building, failure to maintain the structure in a safe condition. The family of Willis Moore filed suit in New York Supreme Court on April 24, 2024, alleging that the Hennicks knowingly disregarded structural violations, that they had the means to address them, and that they chose not to. This is not a fraud story. There is no bribery here, no offshore account, no 10-year scheme. This is a deferred maintenance story, which is the category of story that actually kills most real estate investors. Not dramatically, not with federal prosecutors, but in the accumulation of small decisions to delay a repair, to defer the inspection, to renew the operating license without fixing the thing the last inspector said to fix, until the building makes the decision for you. 4 rules that the previous 2 stories suggest if you decide to proceed anyway. Rule 1. Your structural inspection schedule is not the floor set by the municipality. It is the ceiling of your liability exposure. Every structured parking facility you own gets an independent third-party engineering inspection every 12 months, regardless of what local code requires. You document it. You act on every finding. If you cannot afford to act on a finding, you cannot afford to own that garage. Rule 2. Government and institutional parking contracts are a different business than commercial parking. They have their own procurement rules, their own audit cycles, and their own federal sentencing guidelines for when things break in a specific direction. If you pursue them, you treat every public counterparty as a potential investigation, because the contracting officer sitting across from you does not represent only their agency. They represent a system that occasionally and unpredictably audits itself. Do not give that system a reason to audit you. Rule 3. The cash flow at small scale is not a business. It is a management problem. If your first garage cannot survive a 6-month occupancy drop of 20% without you contributing personal capital, you have not bought a business. You have bought an obligation with parking meters. Your first deal must underwrite a stress scenario, not a base case. Rule 4. The management contract business and the ownership business require different infrastructure and have different risk profiles. Operating a facility you own while simultaneously pitching management contracts to other owners requires either significant staff or significant compromise in one of the 2 directions. Pick one and build it properly. The single biggest structural threat to the parking business is not a competitor, a bad deal, or a regulatory change. It is a fact about where people work and how they move. Downtown weekday commuter parking is the revenue backbone of the urban structured parking business. It is also the category of demand that suffered the most permanent damage from the post-2020 shift to hybrid and remote work. As of late 2024, average urban office utilization rates across major U.S. CBDs remained 30 to 40% below 2019 levels, according to CBRE's office occupancy tracking data. Some markets have partially recovered, many have not. The commuter who used to park downtown 5 days a week now parks 2 days, if at all. The second pressure is electrification. As of 2025, battery electric vehicles represented more than 8% of new U.S. vehicle sales. The EV owner who charges at home does not need a downtown parking space between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. They need a destination charger when they travel, not a daily commuter bay. Cities are simultaneously beginning to mandate EV charging infrastructure in existing structured parking facilities. A retrofit that industry estimates put at $3,000 to $8,000 per space for older concrete structures. A 300-space garage built in 1985 faces a potential mandated capital call of $900,000 to $2.4 million. Before you see $1 of revenue premium for offering it, the longer-term scenario is autonomous vehicles operating as fleets, dropping passengers and self-relocating to peripheral parking at a fraction of current urban land costs. Morgan Stanley projected in 2023 that full autonomous vehicle deployment could reduce centrally located structured parking demand by up to 60% in major urban markets by 2040. That is a 15-year horizon from the present. It is also almost exactly the remaining duration of a mortgage on a parking structure acquired today at current rates. The market is beginning to price this in. Urban parking cap rates in gateway markets have been expanding. Buyers are discounting future cash flows against a scenario in which the demand assumption changes fundamentally. The assets that were bought in 2015 on 20-year underwriting were bought before any of this was visible. The assets you buy now are bought with full knowledge of it. That is not a reason not to buy. It is a reason to be very clear about what your exit looks like and when. Time to pull it all together and answer the actual question. How much money do you actually make if you do this right? Scenario 1. You acquire a 150-space structured garage in a strong secondary downtown market, Philadelphia's Center City, for the sake of a real example, for $4.5 million. Down payment at 30%, $1. $35 million of your own capital. The remaining $3.15 million is a commercial real estate loan at 6.75% over 25 years, which costs you approximately $21,900 per month in debt service, or $262. $800 per year. Revenue, 60 monthly lease spaces at $225 per month generate $162,000 per year. 90 transient spaces running at 72% weekday occupancy and 45% weekend occupancy at an average of $18 per transaction generate approximately $380,000 per year. Total gross, $542,000 per year. Operating costs, 2 full-time attendants, 1 part-time, property insurance, city property tax, annual engineering inspection, elevator contract, software and equipment, run $210,000. NOI, $332,000. After debt service, you have $69, $200 per year in free cash flow on your $1.35 million equity investment. That is a 5.1% cash-on-cash return. Your payback period on the equity is approximately 19 years, longer if a major system fails. Shorter if you raise transient rates. This asset will hold its value, grow slowly, and require your attention constantly. It is a stable, low-return, illiquid investment. It is not passive income. It is a job that you funded instead of getting hired for. Scenario 2. Over 4 years, you build a portfolio of 8 structured garages totaling 2,200 spaces across 4 cities, using your first acquisition as a proof of concept to raise co-investment capital. Total portfolio acquisition cost, $38 million. Equity in from you and 2 institutional co-investors, $12 million total. Debt, $26 million structured as a portfolio loan at 6.5%, $1. $69 million per year in debt service. Because you have built your own management company, a dedicated regional team, handling staffing, maintenance scheduling, dynamic pricing, and enforcement, your operating cost ratio is 29% of gross rather than the 38% you'd pay with a third-party operator. Gross revenue across 1,200 spaces at a blended $285 per space per month. $4. $1 million per year. Operating costs $1.19 million. NOI $2.91 million. Free cash flow after debt service $1.22 million per year to the equity group. Cash on cash return 10.2%. After 5 years, you sell the portfolio at a 6% cap rate. Buyers compress the cap because your assets now have a verified operating track record for $48.5 million. You retire $26 million in debt. Net proceeds to equity, $22.5 million against your $12 million in. That is a $10.5 million appreciation gain plus $6.1 million in cumulative cash flows over 5 years. Total return to the equity group over 5 years, $16.6 million on $12 million. Before tax, before the legal fees from your structural inspection dispute in Cincinnati. Before the 2 months, the Chicago garage ran at 40% occupancy during the transit strike. That is the real number, not the orange vest and the concrete box. 2 times plus in 5 years, earned through 4 years of portfolio assembly, a management company built from zero, and a timed exit before the autonomous vehicle thesis stops being a projection and starts being a vacancy rate. You started this episode thinking parking was simple. The simplest businesses always are from the outside. The money is real at scale after years of work with a capital structure that does not forgive a 20-year-old maintenance report. If you want to watch us do this math on the asset class nobody warns you about, subscribe. We are here every week.